to infinity and beyond.
What's up, everyone? It's Roger and James here from DisKingdom.com with another episode of Infinity and Beyond, your weekly Disney video game podcast. And on this week's show, we're going to kind of be talking all about Marvel video games. We're going to be talking about what we like, what we love, what we're maybe looking forward to. This is kind of an episode that we've recorded while James is over here in jolly good old England, over here in London, having some jelly deals and pie.
No, fish and chips though. I will have fish and chips.
Fish and chips, yeah. You've got to have fish and chips when you're here in England, yeah. And have a proper roast dinner, you know. And you can have yourself a pie, and you know all that stuff. You don't need any burgers or any stuff like that.
I can get burgers here in America.
Yes,
I need English food.
Yes.
Bland English food.
It's not bland, it's lovely. Everyone says about this stuff with English food. I was on all of this, I was talking to a member of staff, and he goes, oh, we're roasting as bland. It's like, it's not bland, it's just that we don't have full-on spice, because we don't have, you can put some pepper or horseradish or something on it if you really want to.
No, I think I'll be okay with bland.
Yeah, yes, no, yeah. Have some cottage pie. That's another one to put on your list of things to do. That's one of my favourites.
I've never heard of cottage pie.
Yes. Right, so on this episode, we're going to be discussing all things kind of like Marvel video games, having a little bit of a kind of a retro feel and kind of just discussing Marvel games as a whole. So, because of, obviously, with you being over here, we're not going to be doing the news kind of things. So what was kind of like one of your first Marvel games that you remember playing?
First Marvel games I remember playing would be X-Men back on the Sega Genesis. Mm-hmm. It was a very difficult side-scrolling platformer. Around the time the X-Men cartoon series was coming out, and I remember playing it with my friend, because he had a Genesis, I didn't, and we never got very far in that game. We got our butts handed to us quite frequently.
Yeah, see, for me, it was probably actually an X-Men game as well, but it was the arcade side-scrolling one that was an amazing game to play. It was a very sort of interesting one. I just remember putting so many quarters or 20 or 10p pieces into the arcade side-scrolling. You had Wolverine, Colossus, I think you had Psylocke. I mean, and at the time, the arcade was superior to home console. It was generations ahead. And yeah, I used to go in there with my pound pocket money, and I used to jump between that and the Ninja Turtles version of the same game, and you also had the Simpsons one as well. They're all next to each other in the arcade. And yeah, and the X-Men arcade game was one that I distinctly just remember playing a lot. And I think they even I don't know if they ever re-released that one.
They did on the 360 as part of the Xbox Arcade for the 360. They did release it. I remember that one because it had the old version of the character costumes. You had the classic Cyclops, Colossus, and so on. And Colossus had the really weird ability where all this energy would explode out of him, and I was always that's not one of his abilities. But
that was my
they did include it.
That was my introduction to the X-Men. That was before the cartoon. I'd never read a comic. That was how I knew the characters. Those were Colossus and Wolverine, and I learned about them and Magneto stuff through that video game. That was how I discovered X-Men. That was so it's even that kind of weird thing of that's how a video game got me into the characters even when I was 9-10 years old, before it, because the cartoon was maybe a couple of years out from that point.
Yeah, I think the cartoon did come after the arcade game, but they became a staple of the home consoles after that too. So there were a lot of different games coming out at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the Genesis era. One of the games I do remember from what I picked up from them was the Amazing Spider-Man versus Kingpin, but I had it on the Mega CD. I remember buying it because that was the extra version. It had a little bit more cartoon elements to it, and I remember that being a side-scrolling one because there wasn't a lot of Mega CD games at the time, but I do remember that one being one that I picked up. I think I rented a few of the other ones like Captain America and the Avengers and Spider-Man. I remember picking up a few ones, but Spider-Man vs. Kingpin was the one that I actually owned.
I remember Maximum Carnage on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, which was based on the comic of the same name. And it's the comic at least started really well and then ended very poorly, but the game was pretty solid all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do remember renting them. There was a few games around that time that for me, you tended to rent. I tended to rent a lot of games. Every weekend I used to go down to the video game or the video shop and rent games every weekend because it was cheaper than buying them. They were £60 each, and you could rent a game for like £2. So it wasn't a very much thing for a 10, 12-year-old that with a couple of pound pocket money. It was you got to try everything. But yeah, so Blockbuster and my local video store, so I basically got all my pocket money for a number of years.
Yep, I remember going down. There was one within walking distance of us, and we would pick up games all the time, and it worked out great, except when you picked up accidentally one of those old JRPGs that would take 80 hours to beat, and you'd only get 4 hours into it because you had limited playtime. Yeah. You really didn't get much of an experience out of that.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the list of games that they released for the Genesis era, they really did kind of go to town on them over 3-4 years. I mean, there was just a ton of different ones of Amazing Spider-Man, Lethal Foes, Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, Spider-Man and Maximum. There was a lot of side-scrolling games out around that time. So I think probably most of us played a little bit at that time, and they were just kind of getting used to it. But I do remember jumping a generation on. It was it was Marvel Superheroes on the PlayStation, which was the 2D, kind of like the beginning of the Capcom version. I remember me and my best friend just constantly playing that game on his PlayStation because he had it and I didn't. So and every time I went over him every week, we just spent hours just battling it out in Marvel versus sort of basically Marvel Superheroes. That was such an amazing game to play.
Yeah, I actually remember the game before that, X-Men Children of the Atom, which was the first of the Marvel Street Fighter-style games. And I sunk so many quarters into that game when I was younger because it was so much fun. I always played as Iceman because he had some great long-range abilities. And then they went on to do that, and then they went on to do Marvel vs. Capcom series. And honestly, I wish they would drop the Capcom portion of it. I would really just like a Marvel fighting game again.
Well, I have a feeling that there's discussion going on in Marvel at the minute. They've said on a number of occasions they are getting requests for that game. They know Contest of Champions is bringing in a ton of money, and I think in general, whether or not they do the remastered ports of Capcom, because I don't know if Capcom have got licenses for anything, but their licenses are all up in the air at the minute. It would not surprise me if we saw a brand new 2D platform or 2D side-scrolling fighter, because it works. The module works. Even now, it will work. And obviously Capcom, after the mess of Street Fighter 5, they could do with kind of probably a couple of big hits.
Well, I think we're actually kind of seeing a resurgence in the fighting genre over the last several years. The Mortal Kombat series came back, Street Fighter came back, even if it had some growing pains. And then there's been new contenders like BlazBlue and whatnot. But heck, even Contest of Champions and then Injustice. The DC one was extremely well met, and they've got the sequel for that coming out. It would make sense for Disney and Marvel to jump in and get a proper fighting game onto the console systems right now while the genre is still hot. Yeah.
And I think as well, I think it's always going to be kind of, and also now they kind of go into all this esports stuff. If they do it well, they can grab a lot of attention that way.
They certainly can, but they have to be very careful about that because there's so many times we hear about games. This will be the next esport game. This will take over the Street Fighter 2 championship or whatever, and then it ends up being, you fought so hard for it to be in the esports that you forgot to make an actual game out of it, and it's not fun for the casual players. And as much publicity as you get out of esports, it's the casual players who bring in the money.
I suppose it's I can't help but feel like with Contest of Champions, it's like if they had a proper button version with an advanced version, and you just now, Doctor Strange, new characters come in, just bring in a new event, and just keep patching in new characters and new things, make it online play and all the rest of it. It could go for years with just new, and they don't have to keep coming up with annual versions. They just keep adding new events and new, competitions and stuff and new tournaments. I think, I just feel like Contest of Champions could work so well. And it's like now, if they just came out with, there's a new Doctor Strange and Mordo pack for, $20 or $50, I think people would buy it.
Well, I mean, Xbox, Microsoft has been doing this with Killer Instinct for the past couple of years. Same genre, same idea. I don't know how well it's been working, but they've at least continued to work on it. They've been releasing new characters, releasing new packs. So it's doing well enough for them to continue supporting it in some form or another.
So do you remember any other games from kind of like PlayStation, sort of Genesis, SNES thing that you used to play?
Most of the ones from that era were the side-scrollers you mentioned, Wolverine, Adamantium Rage. I think there was an Apocalypse one in there too. I think that generation was decided by the side-scrolling brawler games. Obviously, we also had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all sorts of things. That was that generation. I think once we move forward, though, when we get to the PlayStation 2 era, that's when things start to branch out and become interesting.
I do remember having Spider-Man on the PlayStation 1. And I can't remember if it was a I think it was like the first open world kind of version of it. And I remember it being, I don't remember too much about it. I just think because there's been so many Spider-Man games since that have been, based on the movies, and the PlayStation 2 era really kind of kicked that all off. And even just playing Amazing Spider-Man 2 just last month, they keep rewriting over your memory of what you've played.
Yeah, that's true. And then, like you said, there've been so many Spider-Man games, so many Spider-Man movies that they all just kind of blend in, and some of them are absolutely terrible, and some of them are actually pretty good. So
yeah, I must admit, I think this is where the new Spider-Man game that's coming out we don't know when it's coming out, the new Insomniac one, and that's PlayStation 4 only. I'm really excited about it because generally I think I've been dipping in and out of Spider-Man games for the past 25, 30 years, and they usually just keep getting better. You know what to expect. You know you're going to be swinging around. You know the villains you're going to be taking on. It just feels normal. It just feels like, just get a continuation. I mean, it's, if they actually put a number on it, probably Spider-Man 32, because you just had that many games out.
You know what? If they just straight up copied the Batman mechanics and kind of updated them a bit for the modern consoles, I'd be perfectly fine with that. Hopefully it will be entertaining. But the Spider-Man games are so inconsistent that it's going to be something I'm going to watch closely, kind of cross my fingers and hope for, but I'm not going to commit to anything at this point.
I mean, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game, I enjoy playing it for a couple of weeks, playing the basic one, swinging around. The agenda. It's like the movement of Spider-Man. It's always a little bit odd, because it's a unique way of moving. He's kind of got a unique way that nobody other character has. The whole swinging through buildings and wall crawling and wall running and all this stuff. It is a very unique kind of move set. No other character has it, so it is very unique in itself. But it makes a perfect video game.
Yeah, and if they do it right, it could be a fantastic game. It could be the start of a brand new franchise for them, and I hope it does.
I'm just looking here at some of the other games that sort of come out. And again, there was a lot of sort of stuff that, there's a lot in the PlayStation era of X-Men. I don't remember playing them too much. I think I was more on the PlayStation, on the Spider-Man side of things. Just looking here at some other ones. There's tons, we started getting Blades, and I was like, a game a name that just jumped out at me that was like Iron Man and Exo Manowar in heavy metal. I mean, I
remember the ads for that.
What is Exo Manowar? I don't even remember that.
Exo Manowar is a character from the Valiant comics, which was very popular at the time. It was going to be the next big thing, and then it flopped spectacularly. Like, literally, when I was working at the comic shop several years after Valiant collapsed, we would get long boxes of comics in them, and we would just leave them outside, and people would just take them because they were worth nothing. Now, having said that, they relaunched recently the entire Valiant line, and by recently I mean in the past 5 years or so. And they're really good. The comics they're putting out are really good, and they're going to start a television and movie universe, which I think starts next year, maybe the year after. And they're looking pretty solid. Now, the game you're talking about, though, is from the original Valiant era, and there's a reason nobody ever mentions this game. Several reasons, as a matter of fact. it's not a good game at all.
And also just like looking at the movies, that you can really start seeing that we've got into like the movie licensing era starts to kick in around the 2000 era. You start getting, Fantastic Four. You start getting Spider-Man, Blade, X-Men, Wolverine. Blade 2. You really start this Daredevil. We were doing a retro game recently on that, The Incredible Hulk, Wolverine's Revenge. You really start getting into that like movie cash-in era, which generally wasn't really very remembered very well.
No, and for good reason. Although, mentioning one of those, even though the movie X-Men Wolverine was absolutely terrible, the video game was good. It was a solid slashing third-person action-adventure game, definitely R-rated, definitely very bloody. The problem was it was attached to a terrible movie, and it came out at the same time as Batman Arkham Asylum, which was a significantly better game.
Yeah.
So it was a good game, it just got overshadowed by its peers.
There's a lot of sort of like Activision games on this list at this point of like those movie ones. Kind of funny. I'm looking at this list. I've just seen one that said it was Spider-Man on the N gauge. It's like, oh my! Completely forgot about the N gauge, about me buying that thing.
I never bought an N gauge.
Oh, I just remember that was one of the most biggest like. There again, buying into the hype of a new device that did not live up to a mobile phone and a console at the same time. Who would have thought? Nintendo Switch. That was 20.
Not even a Nintendo Switch. That's an iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about the N gauge, and I kind of wish I'd kept forgetting about the N gauge.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, but isn't it like it's like weird? As I start seeing like Game Boy Advance and stuff, and like how basic those kind of games were. It's like they were so different. I mean, to have Ultimate Spider-Man on DS, GameCube, PS2, Xbox, Windows, and Game Boy Advance. It's quite a variety of different kind of hardware. I mean, they were just porting it on everything they possibly could at that era.
And people were buying them. I mean, that was back before people really, really twigged into the fact that licensed games on the whole were pretty much crap. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot then of like the PlayStation 2 era starts kicking up. I think this when the games started getting a little bit better. I mean, I remember even just recently, I remember playing the Ghost Rider game. It's like it's not that bad. There was a lot of kind of movie tie-ins, quick games. Nothing. But as well as that, because they're all on like PlayStation 3, PlayStation, Xbox 360, they didn't look too bad. They're kind of quite new. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Activision start porting these random games over if they kind of get this like weird license to kind of they can't do new ones but reissue old stuff. Marvel seems to be quite happy with that at the minute.
What I would really like, and we kind of skipped over this from the PlayStation 2 era, was the X-Men Legends games, which were the spiritual predecessors to the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, which did get ported over. And, hopefully they do a better job porting over the X-Men Legends games. I do hope that they bring those ones over, because those are great games.
Well, looking at, like, X-Men Legends, and they are, like, PlayStation 2 only, so they weren't PS3 games.
Right.
It's like we see a lot of PlayStation 2 games starting to pop up in the store and stuff. I mean, to be honest, every time I walk into town, I usually pop into the video game old stores, and I usually I've got a pile of PlayStation 2 games to play that I missed. And, you can pick them up for a couple of quid. So sometimes even, like, the digital versions when they're on the PlayStation, like 8-9 quid, and going, well, I can go buy them for £2, the original versions. So it wouldn't surprise me if you start seeing a little bit more of this stuff popping on. But I think the problem with a lot of these games are licensing, of who owns the licensing now to be able to play them.
Right, and the big deal, of course, is with the X-Men license. I think we're seeing them loosen up a little bit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you can sneak Marvel Ultimate Alliance through, which has X-Men characters, but then it's also got Captain America and Black Panther and characters who are actively appearing in Marvel movies right now. Yeah. Whereas the X-Men Legend movies, or games, obviously, are strictly X-Men, which means that it's Fox. So.
Yeah. I'm really kind of hoping that in some ways I've been a little bit disappointed with a little bit of the Xbox 360 backwards compatible, because there's been a ton of games that I've seen on this list of games I want to play. I see in the stores things like Spider-Man Friend or Foe, or Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and the Incredible Hulk. All those things are on the 360, but they're not backwards compatible. So there's not been a lot of Marvel games coming through on the backwards compatibility thing. Even Marvel versus Capcom, they've been kind of a bit slacking, and I can't help but feel that a lot of that is Marvel licensing.
I also suspect that they would much rather remaster the games because they can get more money out of them. So I suspect, as you've been saying, more than likely we will see a lot more remasters because they get more money from that. It also decentivizes the issue of getting the old versions backwards compatible.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a ton of like games, like Deadpool was another example. They remastered it recently, and I really enjoyed playing that game. I played that last year, and again, it was a fun 8-10 hour single player experience. And that's all. Sometimes that's all. For me, that's exactly what I want from a game. So I was quite excited. Like you said, Marvel Alliance 1 and 2, having played the new ported version, that's pretty cool. So there's tons of games in that era that are on my radar. What I want to play, but I can't help but looking at this thing. I've missed a lot of these, and it's that kind of thing. Well, of movie franchises, you avoided them in that era. 10 years ago, we all started to learn to avoid movie tie-ins. We weren't kids. We were I was in my 20s, early. You started to learn that they were not the games to go for. You were better off buying their own new proper games rather than just relying on franchises.
Right, but there's also a big difference now. Spending $60 on a potentially mediocre or crappy game is a lot different than now picking one up for $5 or $6 and being like, okay, you know what? Even if it's not a great game, I'll get a handful of hours of enjoyment out of it. That's a much easier sell. Asking full price, no freaking way.
Yeah, it's that thing like Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2. Like for me, as remastered versions, £45 for the two games. For me, that was a good value. And there's some games here that if they pop up on backwards compatible, I'll pick them up, be it digitally or in store. Because it always really annoys me when you see them in the stores in like £2-3. Backwards compatible, boom! They boom up like 10-15 quid to more than digital. And I'm like, well, I'm buying the digital version at that point. I just want to play the game. I'm not worried about, the rest of it. So there was tons of games and stuff. Anything there that jumped out that you remember playing a lot?
Again, it would probably jump back to the X-Men Legends and the Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Those were the ones I played to death, as well as Spider-Man Maximum Carnage back in the Super NES. And then I think the Marvel game that I have played the most isn't one of the older ones, it's one of the newer ones, Marvel Heroes.
Yeah.
As we're talking about this now, the Doctor Strange event is still going on, but I think it'll be done by the time this airs. And either the week this comes out or in the very near future, they're going to be overhauling a lot of systems in that game, and I'll be jumping back into that. But I've already put a couple hundred hours into it, according to Steam. So
yeah, I mean, I only really got into it this year. I can't help but feel like we're going to get the 2017 upgrade. I do hope in some ways that maybe drop the year title in it, just become.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, make it thing, and bring it to consoles, bring it to the Xbox, bring it to PlayStation 4. Start giving us. I can't help when I'm playing it and I'm using my controller on the Xbox controller, and I'm there going, the buttons here. You've got the menus. You're telling me the buttons are here. You've made the little the knock it thing to kind of. You can play the entire game with your control pad.
And I can't help but think that this overhaul that they're working on is really designed to get it to the consoles, because part of the big point of this is to make it so that characters use less skills overall. Rather than having like 2 bars of 8 skills each, you're supposed to consolidate down to like 6 or 8 skills, which is so much better for a control pad. If you've got 16 skills, you can't really do it on the control pad all that easily, but 8 is perfectly doable. You've got the 2 triggers and you've got the 4 face buttons. That's 8 right there.
Yeah, I can't help but feel like that would be what's going to happen in 2017, and when they will announce that 2017 is rebrand it and come out on the consoles and stuff. I can't wait. And I know, because I know that if they do that, I will be playing it constantly, because I can sit on my big screen, I can sit back, I can sit on the chair, and when I'm trying to play on my laptop, it does not work the same for me, and it's just because I'm a console player. I can't feel like that's the one thing. But I've been really enjoying the game. It's the only PC game I've played for a long time because, like I said, I've even when I was back at college, back in the 90s, when I remember back at school playing, Tetris and SimCity on, so I've been playing PC games for years, but I've never liked the whole upgrading, changing your settings and all the rest of it. It's just one of those annoying little things. Also, doesn't tend to work too well with a mouse, with a touchpad and buttons. Just a clunking of the buttons.
I have to have an external mouse. I can't use a touchpad for gaming at all. I hate using a touchpad for work, let alone anything that requires like precision or quick button movements.
Right, looking at this list, there's tons and tons of games that came out on the 360 era that I don't remember really playing too much. But it's that kind of thing of, as well as that, when we got into like the 2012, obviously 2014 was Disney Infinity, which is, I know we both played a lot of, and I really enjoyed those free play sets. Really thought that worked really well. I bought all the figures, loved it. That was like a big game. It really kind of had that fun factor. 3.0 had Marvel Battlegrounds, which was awful. I hated it.
Yeah.
It was just too short. It wasn't very good. It wasn't,
It was only an hour, less than an hour to complete the entire thing, minus unlocking a couple of things. There wasn't much variety in the gameplay at all. It was definitely a disappointment all around, especially when you considered how good some of the playsets from Disney Infinity 2.0 were.
Yeah.
So
that was really kind of that was kind of like a highlight for that, and it was a shame that it went because I think we were going to see a lot more content. And I can't help but feel we're going to. I don't know with Marvel games whether or not they're going to continue on with this the way they've been doing it the last couple of years with this couple of different platforms, throwing everything out there at once. Because I could easily start seeing now, like I'm saying, like rebrand, if they can brand those onto consoles and update them all at the same time, it's a lot cheaper in terms of development costs, but also coming out with a new game. Like you look at the history of the video games, if like, Thor, Captain America, Super Soldiers, all these different like movie tie-ins. They've said that they don't want to go back to that era.
No, and they shouldn't really, because they need to be moving forward. They need to be worrying about what works in the future rather than going back to the past. That said, we have skipped over one fairly major set of games.
And
go ahead.
I was just wondering, the 2 Lego Marvel games,
and the unannounced but assumed Lego Guardians of the Galaxy, which we're hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I remember picking up Lego Marvel Heroes when it came out. Loved it. Thought that was an amazing, really fun game. Also picked up, Lego Avengers was a really fun game. And like we said, it was the way that like the first game ended with like the introduction of introducing the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was like the end of the game. So you assume
it wasn't even the end of the game. It was after the end of the game.
Yeah, it was the post-credits thing. So you're there going, okay, they're being introduced. Then Avengers comes out. They're not in it.
Not at all.
And you can't help but go, you've got a movie out next year. Well, I wonder what that was like. They've set the tone already. It's like, because when they come out with the Lego Guardians of the Galaxy thing, the poster, the image on the front is going to be all characters that haven't been featured in the game, like, officially at all. It just makes the most sense from like Lego games.
Now, I do hope... I mean, they obviously haven't announced it. It's all supposition at this point. But if they do a Lego Guardians of the Galaxy, I hope they don't do what they did with Lego Marvel Avengers, which is just straight up copy the movies. I want a new adventure with the Guardians, in addition to the movie content. But I want maybe something like The Force Awakens. Make the game, the movies, 1 and 2, and then have the DLC be side stories that happened in between them. Show how we got from point A to point B.
Yeah, I think as well one, it depends really on how well the team are working with. I think the trouble, like with Lego Force Awakens, I don't know if it was that delay of 6 months made the game better, but if they can use audio clips, depends how early in advance they get the story and all the rest of it, because it's that kind of thing of, do they launch it with the movie, or do they launch it like this time next year when it's been out a few months and they've had that few extra months to do it? They mix it all in. They've also, but because they got the first movie and they've got the comics, they've got time to kind of add all that extra content in it.
Right, and I think for Force Awakens was a special situation because nobody knew anything. Even the guys working on Infinity, we heard about the horrific conditions they were working with in that case, where it's like you could go into this room and look at concept art, but you can't take pictures. You just have to take mental notes and stuff like that. So they had no idea what the heck was going on.
I mean, even like the Guardians of the Galaxy playset, they didn't know any. They didn't see. It wasn't until they saw the movie they were like, "Oh, we didn't get it right."
Yeah. So hopefully Marvel and Disney are kind of willing to back off a little bit on that and just go, all right, you know what, if they want to do a proper game, they need to have access to it. But we don't know. They might not. That might be why we don't have a Rogue One game announced yet.
In some ways, I can't help but feel like an extra 5-6 months makes the games better.
Well, there's that too. Plus, it keeps the name of the franchise in the mind of people. Like, the Guardians of the Galaxy movie comes out. A couple months later, it comes out on DVD and Blu-ray. And then a little bit after that, right when the hype's starting to die down, you're like, oh, hey, here's the Lego game. All right, cool.
Just in time for the home video version. But it's also like, when you're looking at the games, like, you can really see when I'm looking at this list of how, like, the platforms of different eras, like, you go through the eras of the generations of, there's a big, like, Genesis SNES era, and then you have the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and then, like, now you look at, and it's like, Android, iOS, Android, iOS, Android, iOS, and that seems to, the only trouble is, like, I think with the Android, iOS game thing, is like, they're dead. Once they get taken off the platform, it's not like, you can go out and you can buy, they might bring back a PlayStation 2 game or a SNES game or something like that. Those iOS games, I don't know if they're ever, going to do some retro gaming. Let's try and download, Contest of Champions in 10 years' time, because it's not going to work.
Well, the other thing about this list that kind of jumps out at me is you look back even like 2 years, back to 2014, you get the iOS games. You've got Captain America, the Winter Soldier, official game, X-Men, Battle of the Atom, Thor, Dark World, the official game. And now you've got more generic games like Contest of Champions, Future Fight, games like that. But also games that have switched from, okay, you pay a $2 or $3 upfront fee and you get the game, versus these games now which are basically aggressively hunting for consistent money grabs but giving you the base game free. And I think, you can kind of see in this list of games where that transition occurred, not just for Disney, but for mobile games in general.
Yeah, but I can't help but feel like mobile games, there's a bit of a thing going on now where people are starting to, it's like 2-3 years into this aggressive, like, microtransactions, and people starting to go, whoa, hold up. Give us a price, people are going, no, hold on, I'll pay for it, just give me the content. They don't like, it's like, I do have this problem with Contest of Champions and things like that, where, Doctor Strange is out. I want to play as Doctor Strange. Can I just buy him, please? Just have, at least with Marvel Heroes, you can just pick the one you want, rather than, going through all this stuff. So I think we're going to go see a lot of, like with Marvel now, where they're going to have a puzzle game, a fighting game, a strategy game, and have console games and other things coming in. I just feel like the sort of the tie-in with movie games and stuff, I just can't, maybe we'll see an Infinity War, game, but are we going to see a Captain Marvel game? I just don't think they're into that anymore. I think they've got so much history of video games now. Marvel games, date back to 1982. This is not new anymore. This is, and I think as well, you can't help but feel like going, you've had nearly 40 years of history making games now. You can't keep saying you're learning. It's like, well, yeah, you're obviously learning, but you've got a lot of data to back it up now.
Right. Well, going back on what you said there, I think chances are we're not going to see an Infinity War game. We're not going to see a Black Panther game or a Captain Marvel game. I think more than likely, at least for this kind of business, for Marvel, Marvel, Disney, and Star Wars, we see open-ended platforms that they can add on to rather than creating their own content. So instead of seeing Infinity War games, we'll see what we're seeing right now with Doctor Strange, which is Contest of Champions will have an Infinity War event. Future Fight will have an Infinity War event. The Puzzle Quest will have an Infinity War event. Plus whatever games are coming out at that time will have an Infinity War event. And then there might be a couple months down the road a Lego Marvel Infinity Wars or something like that. Yeah. And I think that's the future. What, for better or worse?
Because as well as like, I do believe the console era is... The console's not been getting a lot of attention lately. I think all the moves went to Android iOS where they were making money, because I can't help but feel like they chucked all their eggs into the Disney Infinity basket, and that's then obviously not worked. And like now they've got to look at, making better games. I think obviously Spider-Man's going to be a big one. They know the Lego games are going to appeal to kids and all the rest of it, but they'll want to get some content on there. It's like, they can't do shooting. But you look at like some of the things like Overwatch and Destiny, of how they keep doing events and how they do expansion packs, and that there is where, you could like easily see stuff happening. But they've got to make it right. They've got to work out a way of doing it. Certain games don't work so well, like Puzzle Quest on the Xbox when they brought out a Dark Rain version of it. It was a bit of fun, but those kind of games don't tend to get played so much on consoles. But a fighting game, shooting game, platforming, things like that. Those are traditional kind of console stuff. Like I say, Marvel Heroes would work very well on it. Contest of Champions could work very well on it. And I think, I just don't know. It would be great to see something like that coming on in the coming years ahead.
I would be surprised if we didn't, honestly, because we're going to see these companies saying, this method of making money on phones with the consistent release of content, can we apply this to console markets? Can we apply the Killer Instinct style of gameplay to Contest of Champions on the consoles? I would not be surprised if 2017 wasn't the year where we really see at least Marvel and Disney and Star Wars really taking the lessons learned from mobile and putting them onto consoles. I mean, they're already going in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, I think DC Universe was a big hit on the PlayStation, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's I think its subscriber base grew by an exponential amount compared to how long it had been out and how long it hadn't been really just kind of been drifting in the background. But we've also seen this with all sorts of MMOs. A lot of times when they go from the subscription model, the $10 to $15 a month, to free to play, but you have to pay for X, Y, Z. At least Star Wars: The Old Republic, I remember when that transitioned over, and they said their profits like tripled overnight. Just amazingly. I think Star Trek had the same thing. It wouldn't be surprising to me if there were other games that happened too as well. Lord of the Rings, for instance.
Yeah, there's always that thing, I think, with console games where we want to pay that $60, get the game, and that's it. And it's like, businesses just like looking at it going, this is not, because in all reality, those games actually should be costing us $120, $150 for them to make the money that they used to make on them. And microtransactions and season passes are their way of giving us the price rise through the back door. Because, like we said, I remember buying, Sega, Amazing Spider-Man versus Kingpin, probably it was about £45, £50. Now I can go buy, Watch Dogs 2, £45. 25 years later. There's no reason why the season pass and the DLC had to come in, because we're still paying the same price we were 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's one of the very few industries where the price has not increased alongside inflation, which is amazing. But then, as you were saying, you look at it and you go, well, yeah, you pay $45 or $60 for it, and then you pay another $20 for the first expansion and then another $20 for the next expansion, and it adds up. Yeah. People were all outraged when Battlefront, the first one, when they're like, oh yeah, with the season pass it comes out to $110, and then you go back and you do the math and you're like, well, games in this genre have cost that and more. Yeah. They just didn't ask for it up front.
Yeah, I think as well as, I think there's still that mentality. It's like you see, I'm standing there in game, and the parents say, look how expensive these games are, and it's like, what? It's like, that kind of thing of the value of games for some people, like I don't know, like where Hitman is a perfect example of something at the minute where people are complaining on, I don't want this season pass system, I don't want this, just release the game as it is, and I want to pay one price, have it all, and I want, that's one way of playing games. Things are changing, things are, the episodic thing, the constant upgrades. We have the internet connection which allows that. Now, whether or not it does give them chance to maybe release games when they're not fully ready because they haven't done all the work on them yet, whereas they, you look back at the NES and the SNES era and all that lot, and the PlayStation era, the game had to be ready to roll when it went out on the disc. There was no update. There was nothing. The game had to be go. And then you can't wonder why all those really bad games in the noughties was because they were rushing them to get them out on time.
I think what we're going to see is a lot of games have to choose what kind of model they're going to be, because there are going to be times when, the old style model that we're talking about, you pay one price and you're done, will work. There are games that don't need updates. Maybe they need a patch, but then they don't need DLC. And then we're going to see other games doing the mobile style or some combination of both.
Yeah.
But the big question going forward is who is going to, or which game is going to be best under which system.
It's like Contest of Champions. I can't help but feel like if they released it for $60 and you got 20, 30 characters and a load of areas opened up, and people would be like, that's cool. You do a free-to-play model, and I was like, and then, now we're bringing out Doctor Strange character available to purchase separately, rather than the mystery bag thing. It's that really weird thing. It's that
I
thing
hate the mystery bag.
That I don't know if console owners are not willing to accept that the same way. Console owners are very different to mobile.
I think, though, the random number generator style of distribution is starting to take place in the console, though, but it's being done using in-game currency rather than real currency. It's only a matter of time before they transition over, though, because as gamers, we've been trained to accept this idea of the random number generator, and as much as I hate it, it's obviously a way for the companies to make a lot more money, and I refuse to pay into it, but there are plenty of people who are more than happy to pay into it. What's funny about this, though, is you were describing the Contest of Champions, people who would pay $60 up front, and then people who would do like the free-to-play model. What we'll probably see is there'll be an upfront cost, and then there'll also be the DLC cost. So they'll really be getting both players on it, and nobody will be happy. But as long as it's a good game, they'll be okay.
Yeah, definitely kind of feels like we say. I think from Marvel's point of view, it makes sense for them to have like the different platforms of like a fighting. They haven't kind of gone down the shooting point yet. That's the one thing they haven't really gone down too much. But it doesn't really work with the characters, other than Punisher. It doesn't really work so well, but it's like I do like like now they do these cross-game events, and it seems to cover all different kind of aspects rather than just tying into movie. I think as well, like with Marvel characters now, they're all so much well known. Other than a few one like Captain Marvel and a few of these other characters, they've been sort of feeding into these games for years. Like I said, coming out of a new Captain America game doesn't sell the same way. People want all of it. They're used to Civil Wars. They're used to having everybody in there.
Yeah. Even when you go to a Marvel movie, actually, Doctor Strange was one of the few exceptions to this, where if you go to the movie, you go to Thor, you see Thor Dark Ages, and Captain America appears very briefly halfway through it. Granted, it's Loki disguised as Captain America, but he's still in there. You recognize him from the other movies. You go see Incredible Hulk, and Tony Stark shows up at the end, and so on and so forth. Doctor Strange does have one appearance in the end credits from one of the other Marvel characters, but other than that, it's off on its own. Yeah, so if you get a Doctor Strange video game, you're going to expect to have other characters popping into it as well.
But then it's like the thing, like from now on, Doctor Strange now is just fair game for every other movie. And that's, it's almost a thing of, once they've done their intro movie, they rarely ever get their own movie ever again. No,
unless they're one of those core guys, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor.
But then you look back and like now of like, even Captain America now, Captain America Civil War had a few characters in.
I mean, a few.
Winter Soldier had a lot. Even Iron Man 3. He was. I mean, there's that kind of thing. We're getting they know that they make more money on these big, Ant-Man. It's Once you get into that secondary tier of movies, once they get past the debuts, they all start intermingling because they know they can make more money off it. And Thor Ragnarok is going to be out way off.
End of next year, yeah.
Yeah. We're going to have Hulk, Strange. There's going to be lots of different characters popping up in that one.
Yeah, and I mean, even before that, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is probably going to have a lot of characters in it as well. I would not be surprised if there weren't some of the already introduced characters popping up in there, too, because they've got to get those characters introduced before Infinity War.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, but definitely in terms of like Marvel games, there's so much content out there. So, like I said, I can't see. I think this is the thing, because obviously Disney Infinity, but they were still planning on doing that for next. There was going to be a Thor Ragnarok playset. I'm trying to think. Well, there was a Guardians of the Galaxy content as well.
I'm sure there was going to be.
So this is where that was kind of tying up that end of it again. But then the way I look at that again was a platform. That was the kids' platform, the Lego platform. These different versions and stuff. There's now just a big hole, I think, on one side, and I think the console Infinity side of things was that side of things. I mean, they have probably been scrambling all year trying to work out the plan going forward to fill the console void.
Now, I will bet you, though, that there was absolutely going to be Guardians of the Galaxy 2 content on Disney Infinity, and the main thing behind it was they're going to take all of those leftover Yondu figures, stick the fin on the top of it, and sell it again.
We're going to make 10 million of them things that no one
No,
wants.
you don't. You already have 9 million sitting on shelves. All you got to do is stick the fin on top, and you're good to go.
It's also kind of quite interesting. I'm looking here at like you look at the history of video games, and there's a lot of like LGN games. I don't even remember them as a publisher, but Activision has been very, very, very uncapped. But you look at the list of Activision games, and they were just churning them out. I mean, I'm just looking here. I mean, Sega made a load, but once we kind of got Plane made a few, but once we got into the Activision around 2000 with the Spider-Man franchise, they were just churning them out. There must be 30, 40 games there coming through.
Easily.
And still we do.
And some of them cross generations. A couple of them would have releases on both the PlayStation and the Xbox and the PlayStation 2, GameCube. Some of them went from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3. They put a lot of work into these, and they've got a very deep selection of games that they could be updating for modern consoles or kind of continuing on. Heck, Captain America Super Soldier was an underrated game. It wasn't a spectacular game, but it was a certainly well put together Batman Arkham Asylum clone.
Yeah.
Absolutely a lot of fun. You throw that up there for a $20 remaster, and yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah.
X-Men Destiny needs to be forgotten completely. And yeah.
I can't help but feel Activision are holding. They don't want their backwards compatible, because I think, and I would not be surprised if 2017 is the year of some of these random games from the 360 era and PlayStation 3 just popping up, bare bone ports, $20, as Marvel are going, right, we've got nothing to fill the gap with all these movies out the way. You want to make some money, we want to make some money, players want to play it. Let's throw it out there. What about backwards compatible with the 360? Now we want PlayStation people to have that as well.
You know what? I'm 100% with you on that. I think, we'll start getting random ports for these games. They'll be like, all right, you know what? Here, have Spider-Man Edge of Time. Go ahead, have Iron Man 2. And you know what? Maybe once they release enough of them, 4, 5, 6 of them, we'll end up getting some physical releases too, with just compilations like we're seeing with Kingdom Hearts. Here's Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 and Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and Thor God of Thunder all in one package for you for the Xbox One and PS4. All of these games are crappy ports, but whatever. It's $15. Who cares?
Yeah. And I think as well as sometimes like those 360 games, that era, they don't look that bad. There was not really a big enough jump between the 360 and the Xbox One in terms of what they graphically did. You can see it with the PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 4. You can see it like with even down to like I thought with like the Ultimate Alliance recently. You could tell the difference between 1 and 2 of how much they changed jumping across.
I mean, you look at Marvel Ultimate Alliance #1. It came out in 2006, literally 10 years ago. it doesn't look that bad. Sure, it doesn't have all of the polish of a modern game, of all the special effects that you can throw in there, the particle shaders and the, and so on and so forth. But it's not a bad-looking game.
Yeah.
It's perfectly playable, and as long as they don't screw up the port to the PC like they did, it'd be a great game to bring across. Even the games that at the time people were like, it doesn't look that good, they don't look that bad.
No. I mean, it's like, what was it? We've got, 4 God of Thunder, that was a Sega game, so Sega aren't playing with Disney at the minute. They've kind of pulled all their support for that. But yeah, no, I could easily see some of these games coming out. And as we said, I think long term we're just going to see lots and lots of just that kind of content of reports, because, like I said, they're restructuring what they're doing, but also, major titles like Spider-Man, they cost a lot of money, and I don't think they are looking at that anymore as like, this is sustainable. Gamers are moving on. Gamers are, they will move on to the next release like that next week. And these big AAA titles, all the big companies are all looking to kind of spread their wings and keep people playing them.
On the other hand, though, I think that they've realized that if they separate out these licensed titles from the movies, they have a much better shot. So this is not Spider-Man Homecoming, a tie-in to the upcoming 2017. This is a Spider-Man game, which to us as gamers says, it's not a media attachment. Yeah. They might actually be putting effort into it, and certainly it looks like they are. So this might actually be worth looking at. This is more like Batman Arkham Asylum, which did not attach to any movie. And, that's part of why the Wolverine game failed, because it was attached to the Wolverine movie.
Yeah, I think they learned a lot with the Batman Arkham games, kind of told them to kind of go, works. But, like we said with Contest Champion, we look at Injustice and go, that is an epic fighting game. And now they're doing a second one, but then they carried that on with a mobile, but I don't think it ever took off just as much as the Contest of Champions on mobile.
No, that's one thing, the DC side of things. They haven't quite clicked with how to do it, though they did just release a new
there's a new game
mobile game
this week.
Yeah, DC Legends, I think it was. And it's basically a carbon copy clone of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes.
Yeah.
But it's fun enough. It's a turn-based game, so I know it's not your genre, but the prices on it are absurd, and I don't think it's going to do all that well, but at least they're trying out. They're getting back into the market, and points to them for trying.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much kind of going to wrap up our kind of look back at some of our favourite games, some of the ones we missed, some of the ones we didn't, what we want to see remastered, what we want to play. Because I must admit, there's a few games from that era which I didn't play games from, like you say, like movie tie-ins, because they were generally you just avoided them. But you chuck, Captain America Super Soldier up on PlayStation Network tomorrow, I'll play it.
I'll play it again. It was a fun game. It was not a great game, but it was absolutely fun, and I enjoyed I think it was like 6 hours with the game.
Yeah.
I would get it again, definitely.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some PlayStation 2 games coming up onto it and stuff, because they didn't seem to be bringing a lot of them up. And I think as well, like long term, the PlayStation 4 network and the Xbox marketplace, they're going to be around a lot longer than we've been used to with console generations. So they want to get them out there and just available. I think the Xbox Scorpio is just going to be a more powerful. I think they're abandoning the concept of new generation start again from scratch, because they realize it's not working.
Well, I think even if they did, even if we went from Xbox One to, let's just say, Xbox 2 or PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5, and a true generation shift, not like we're seeing right now, I suspect that at the very least the digital stores will carry over. Anything that you purchase now on a PS4 store or on an Xbox One store will be workable on the next generation, because both sides, both Sony and Microsoft, had to have seen the backlash against them when they're like, oh yeah, Xbox One, Xbox 360 doesn't work on it, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3 doesn't work on it, and people were pissed, and I think they took note of that.
Yeah, and also the era of digital distribution, they want us to go digital, they have to start giving that continuous, like a Steam back catalogue, where that you've got access to it. and that's worked. And jumping generations, it's like having the entire same conversation about the Nintendo Switch of Wii owners and Wii U owners going all about backwards compatibility, because people want to play the content they've had. It's kind of odd, I think, as well, in just general, like, it's like with movies. I feel like with DVD and Blu-ray, home ownership of these movies has dropped as people fed up and keep rebuying them on different platforms.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. And, not just for the stuff we already own, but if I'm going to go out and buy a Switch, I didn't own a Wii U. I owned a Wii for a very short amount of time. There's a whole bunch of games I never played, and if I can get those games at a decent price on the Switch, either by going to my local GameStop and picking up used copies or getting them digitally, that is a huge incentive for me to go out and buy a Switch, to be like, all right, well, we know you missed the most recent Zelda game. Here you go. You can play it on this system right here.
Also just means you've got a huge back catalogue of just games that people are going to play and stuff. There's just so much out there now. And I think in general, we're, like you say, we're now playing games from, look at the NES Classic Collection Edition is out like this month. And people are going nuts over playing NES games. It's just, people have gone past it now. Yeah,
and it's, we want access to the games that we played, regardless of whether or not we will actually play them. We want to have that capability to do so.
Well, on that note, guys, let us know in the comments below, what was your favorite Marvel game? What are some of your highlights? I'd love to know all of your thoughts on all of them there. As per usual, guys, remember you can check us out at DisKingdom.com for your latest Disney video game news. You can also join our Infinity and Beyond Facebook group for discussions there. And also, big thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/DisKingdom. You really, guys, do make a difference. It helps us pay for licensing for software, hosting the podcast version, etc. So you guys all help out there. And that's pretty much it for this week's show. So, James, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at VagabondPeak and also vagabondpeak.com, which will probably be updated shortly after this airs. By shortly, I mean a couple weeks.
Yes. So now he's over here in jolly good old English, and he'll be awake at the normal time when it's daylight, when this might be aired, when we would normally be recording this.
Yes, however, I will not be using my mobile data across the pond to watch it. So,
well, on that note, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we shall see you guys soon. Laters.
Yep.
Laters.
X-Men Destiny.